This holy ground, we're standing on holy ground, for the Lord is here, and where He is holy. This is holy ground, we're standing on holy ground, for the Lord is here, and where He is holy.
I would like to start by just quoting from St. Luke's Gospel. This year, we're reading from St. Luke. All right, and we'll be reading from the Gospel of St. Luke until next Advent. And I would like to read this passage, which we are all familiar with, where the angel Gabriel announces to Mary that she is to become the mother of the Savior of the world. In the 6th month, the angel Gabriel was sent from God to a town of Galilee called Nazareth, to a virgin betrothed to a man named Joseph of the house of David, and the virgin's name was Mary. And coming to her, he said, "Hail, full of grace, the Lord is with you." But she was greatly troubled at what was said, and pondered what sort of greeting this might be. Then the angel said to her, "Do not be afraid. You have found favor with God. Behold, you will conceive in your womb and bear a son, and you shall name him Jesus. He will be great and will be called Son of the Most High. And the Lord God will give him the throne of David his father, and he will rule over the house of Jacob forever. Of his kingdom there will be no end." But Mary said to the angel, "How could this be, since I have no relations with a man?" And the angel said to her in reply, "The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. And behold, Elizabeth, your relative, has also conceived a son in her old age. And this is the 6th month for her who was called barren. For nothing will be impossible for God." Mary said, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. May it be done to me according to your word." The reason I'm bringing this up is that scholars tell us that Mary probably was around 13 or 14 years of age when the angel Gabriel. It was the custom in those days. You have to remember, today people live to be in their 90s and hundreds. At the time Jesus was born, teenagers were basically giving birth to children. So Mary was probably in the 13, 14 age bracket. And here she's getting a message from an angel that she is to become a mother and conceive a son. I have no doubt in my mind that Mary had absolutely no idea that once she accepted that message, what her life would be like. When I deal with young couples, I tell them two of the most important decisions any human being will ever make in their life. And I really believe this. I've been a priest 47 years. The two most important decisions: choosing a life partner and getting married. I cannot think of a decision more important to bring you either the greatest happiness or the greatest sorrow if you make the wrong decision than choosing a person to spend the rest of your life with. All other decisions in life, as far as I'm concerned, are immaterial. All right? What kind of job, where you're going to be living, they're not as important as who am I selecting to spend the rest of my life with. And the second most important decision, and I may mention this at baptisms, is to choose at some particular point in that married life to bring a child into the world. Because once you make that decision, there is no going back. And let's be realistic. In America today, right now, once you make that decision, be prepared, because in many cases, that child will be living with you for the next 30 years. All right? Children do not move. When I was growing up in the Bronx, at 18, you had a high school sweetheart, you had some idea of what you wanted to do in life, you got married, and you moved on. That's not true any longer. I think of the vows of marriage. On the day of a wedding, when a husband and wife turn to each other and they say, I will love you and honor you in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for the rest of my life. How simple those words are to understand. There isn't a kindergarten kid who does not understand what good times and bad times are. There's not a kid who doesn't understand what the words sickness and health mean. But on the day of a wedding, when a couple exchange those words, it's almost like Mary 2,000 years ago. They really have no full, complete appreciation of how those words can come into effect in the course of a married life. When Mary said to the angel, your will be done, I am the handmaid of the Lord, did Mary know that 30 years later, 33 years later, what she would be dealing with as a mother of an only child? No. She would watch her son grow up. She would watch her son Jesus engage men and women from town to village. People would love him, people would hate him, until finally Mary would be at the foot of the cross watching her son die. Did she know that the day the angel Gabriel made that announcement? Absolutely not. And I don't think any married couple on the day of their wedding would have any idea what they would be dealing with in the course of their married life. Because it could change within 5 minutes. It may take 5 years. And then you find what the words good times and bad times truly mean. That's the nature of married life. All right? I will never experience that. I will never experience what for a couple good times and bad times are. All right? But those of you who are here this morning already know what that means and how those words come into effect. I mentioned downstairs that I spent 14 summers as the Army chaplain at Tripler Army Medical Center in Honolulu. This was a huge operation. I mean huge. About 4,000 employees, all right? And I would go out for the summer for 6 weeks straight. So I would be on duty, because I was a reservist, I would be on duty 24 hours a day, on call, for 6 weeks straight. And I would fulfill my military obligation for that year, all right, by those 6 weeks. Whereas normally, as a reservist or National Guard, you go away 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks during the summer. But because it was Honolulu and the distance involved, the Army made this arrangement. You go out, you do 6 weeks straight, you fulfill a whole year of duty. In this hospital, as I said, covered the whole Pacific. 52% of the world's surface was covered by this hospital. On an average month, there would be about 250 to 275 births taking place in that hospital. All right? People would come in from Japan. This is military, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, and Diplomatic Corps. If they were going to give birth, they would come into Triple Army Medical Center, fly in, because this hospital had a wonderful NICU unit, a wonderful, fully staffed, ready to go obstetrics, delivery, the whole shebang. So they would give birth there to about 250, 275 babies a year, right? As you can imagine, not all of them survived. So I would be called out at 2 or 3 in the morning when a mother's ready to give birth and be told by the nursing staff when I arrived at the hospital, all right, that a mother has given birth to a stillborn child. All right. I've been a priest 47 years. What do you say to somebody confronting the death of a child? I mean, what words? What I found in my experience, it was presence. The fact that someone could pick up a phone, make a phone call, and I would be able to be there, even if my words were not words of wisdom, but be there, be a presence, be a sign of God at that moment of desperation, was the most I could do. I would try to offer prayers for the mother and provide whatever comfort, ask whatever can be done. You have to remember, most of these families were away from home. Most of their families were on the mainland here in the United States. So here you have a husband and wife basically on military duty alone, 3,000 miles from any mainland anywhere, now experiencing a moment of true sadness and hurt. I was astounded, and this is where I think the ministry of presence is so important. The nursing staff at this hospital was extraordinary, because they saw this frequently and immediately went into action to do everything possible to ensure that this mother would be comforted. What did they do? The worst scenario that I've seen, mother gave birth to triplets, all stillborn. All right? When I got there, the nurses were bathing the babies and clothing them. All right? And they presented the 3 children to the mother to hold as they took pictures, because family was not there. Family was here, New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. So the idea was at least the family would have had an opportunity to see these children. All right, it was astounding to me. I mean, I was awestruck by how quickly these nurses went into action and did what was so important for that particular mother. Presence. And the reason I say presence is important because we say stupid things. We all say stupid things. I've been at wakes where people will come in to console a mother or a father over the death of one of their children. And it doesn't make any difference, by the way, how old the child is. All right? The child could be 25, the child could be 35, the child could be 3 years old. But people don't know what to say. And, people have the knee-jerk reaction of saying something like, well, it's God's will. All right? Or your son or daughter is in a better place. Well, if you're a parent, you really don't want to hear this. I mean, I wouldn't want to hear it. This is God's will. This is God's will that you take my child away from me. See, I don't believe that. I don't believe that's God's will. I would not be able to go up to this altar, say Mass, and worship if I truly believed that it was God's will that you, as a parent, would have to experience in your life this unimaginable loss and hurt. I would not come here to worship. I wouldn't believe that. But people say things like that, or he's in a better place, or she's in a better place. No parent wants to hear this, all right? People don't know what to say. It's not that people intend to say things that are hurtful, we are speechless. And why are we speechless? Why are there no words that we can offer? There are no words because what has transpired goes so against the natural order of things. It's the natural order of things that we bury our parents, that we bury our grandparents. This is part of the unnatural order of things for parents to have to let go of their children. That's not the way nature and life should flow. And so people say things, that unfortunately people dwell on. I'll give you an example of that. About a year after losing a son, and he was in his 20s, a mother calls me up. This was in a different parish. A mother calls me up, says, "Father, can I come and talk with you?" All right. She comes in and she says to me, she said, at my son's wake, our minds are like tape recorders. All right, we constantly replay events, words that were spoken. Maybe if we had said something different, did something different, made a different decision, we constantly replay this. And this mother was replaying something she heard at her son's wake in her mind over and over and over again. And it bothered her. And it took a year for her to explore what she was feeling. And she said, at my son's wake, she said, a woman came in and said what many of us probably would end up saying, it's God's will. And she said, the more she kept playing that over in her mind, the angrier she became. Because she could not reconcile the fact that the God that she prayed to and worshiped would be the same God that would take her son away from her. And she could not reconcile this tension until finally she said she had to talk to somebody. She had to talk to a priest. Is this really God's will? Was this really God's will that my son be taken away? And I had to say that, and I said then what I say now. I said, people say that because they don't know what to say. It sounds devout, all right? It sounds as if we are placing our complete trust in God, knowing better than we what needs to be done. I said, but people say that without really considering basically the implications of what they're saying. We do and say stupid things. We do. My first year at Tripler, a Navy, active duty Navy seaman and his wife had just arrived in Honolulu, transferred from Maryland. I'll never forget this. And I was only there about a week in the hospital. And the girl, they were transferred to Honolulu because some doctor had recommended that because the girl had some kind of chronic respiratory issue, that getting her out of Maryland and out of pollution and out of whatever, all right, it would be better if they went 3,000 miles into the Pacific Ocean, all right, in the middle of nowhere, all right, where there wouldn't be these pollutants and allergies and whatever. Well, anyway, to make a long story short, within a week, the girl went into respiratory distress. All right, and when they called me, I happened to be at the hospital at that time, was during the day. All right, I went down into the emergency room, and the girl was being worked on. She was 2 years old, being worked on by, I couldn't believe, I don't know if you've ever been into one of these emergency rooms in a true emergency, not somebody who, fell and tripped and broke a leg. I mean, where 15 doctors and nurses are working on this little girl. Everything. I mean, things strewn on the floor, gloves, cotton, this, that, boop, bop. All right. They worked on her for about 45 minutes. The mother and father were sitting on the floor outside that emergency room. All right. There was nothing they could do. And the first things I heard from that parent was, why did we come here? Why did we come here? And I'm sure they were beating themselves up wondering if this was the best move they could have made for their daughter's health, only to end up this way. You know, when you're a parent who has lost a child, people I don't want to say they stay away from you. I mean, all right, they come to the wake, they, they offer their condolences. But what ends up happening, my experience is, you become somewhat isolated because other people don't understand what you are carrying in your heart. So you are alone. You are basically alone. And the reason I bring these stories up, because I would love to tell those parents they're not alone. They're not alone. I tried to contact them after the burial of their daughter. But, you know, in the military, trying to track down people because of movement and transfers and whatnot, I wanted to let them know that stayed with me. And then that had to be 14, 15 years ago. I didn't forget. They're not alone. I think of that girl. I think of that emergency room. I could picture those parents today as if it just happened, and where it happened, exactly where it happened. But parents who have suffered the loss of a child all of a sudden feel nobody can appreciate where I am. I'm alone. And I think I'm hoping that something like this today is a church's way of telling you are not alone. You're not alone in this feeling. We do try to reach out to you. We haven't forgotten. We haven't forgotten that you're carrying a wound that I will never carry in my life. We haven't forgotten. But parents feel that way. That others, their friends, their neighbors who have families and whatnot, haven't lost a child, that I've become different now because I'm carrying something they can possibly appreciate. I'm alone, and nobody's reaching out. No, you know, how many times do I hear people, even if you lose a spouse, for example, and if you've been going out with a group of people weekend after weekend, you lose a spouse, it's all of a sudden like you've become different, all right? You can't share the same thing with the same group of people because now it's not a foursome, you know? Now it's a husband and wife and a widow or a widower, all right? People feel like, gee, somehow they've been put into place by themselves. And I think it's important for all who carry this type of burden to know you're not alone. We do remember, we do pray, we do try to reach out to the best of our ability, even though we may never have experienced that particular type of loss. In 47 years in the priesthood, the most difficult thing I've had to do was to bury a child, a young person. There's nothing else. I mean, I've dealt with all kinds of things, believe me. I've had husbands and wives in front of me screaming and yelling at each other, all right, in the course of their marriages because they've reached an impasse, all right. I could sit there, all right, and I could take this, all right. And of course, then the anger is sometimes directed to me, all right, like I have something to do with your marital issues, all right. No, but I mean, the fact of the matter is, I could take anything. The most difficult job is to bury a young person. When I say young, it doesn't make any difference. If it's the child of parents, it is the most difficult thing we as priests do. I can't think of anything else that I do in my priesthood that is more difficult, more sensitive, more challenging than to reach out to parents who are suffering a loss. My very first assignment as a priest, well, it was really my second assignment. When I was ordained a priest in 1972, I was stationed up in Carmel, New York. And I was only there for 3 months because it was a summer assignment. In those days, priests had summer assignments, so you would only go for 3 months because those parishes would increase in size during the summer for people who had summer homes up there. And then after the 3 months were over, then you would be assigned permanently to someplace else. So, I only spent 3 months there, and then I was assigned to Cornwall on the Hudson, just north of West Point. And I was in the parish there. I'm there maybe 2 weeks. I got there in September. This was probably November. The police arrived at the rectory door. I'm brand new in this place, trying to find my way in that whole Newburgh, New Windsor area. And the police, it was a lousy night, a rainy night, windy. The leaves were already starting to blow all over the place. And they go, "Father, we just had a young person killed on Route 9W, was hit by a car. And we would like to make a notification." As it happened, the girl who was killed had a big argument with her mother and left home. And she was walking along Route 9, I'll never forget this, Route 9W, which I don't know if you're familiar with, on the other side of the river. All right, was hit by a car. It was dark, it was rainy, it was dangerous. And so I go with the police to the parents' home, and they're not Catholic. All right, they weren't Catholic. I think they were Presbyterian. And I don't have to tell any parent. You see the police and a priest at your door at, say, 10 o'clock at night. We don't have to explain anything. This is not going to be good news. And the mother, in particular, because I think the argument was with her mother, could not believe that within a matter of the daughter leaving the house, she was gone. There is no easy way for those who make a notification and those who receive a notification to wrap their minds around what has just transpired. There is no easy way to do this. These are the bad times in the course of a relationship and marriage, and they do happen. I think of the very end of the gospel stories. Where is Mary? She's at the foot of the cross. She's at the foot of the cross with Jesus. If you look at St. John's Gospel, all right, where is Mary? Mary is at the marriage feast in Cana, the very first miracle Jesus performs. She comes up to Jesus, she says, "Well, they have no more wine." All right, and said, "Well, what do you want me to do?" All right, and Mary said, "Well, do whatever he tells you," to the waiters. And Jesus transforms the water into wine. All right, at the very beginning of the ministry, that was the very first miracle Jesus performs. We see Mary again at the very end of the gospel, at the foot of the cross. All right. Did Mary ever suspect at that wedding feast in Cana, when Jesus was roughly 30 years of age, that 3 years later, that she would be at the foot of his cross? There's no way to predict any of this. There's no way. We're here to support each other during those bad times, those bad moments in life. That's what we're here for. That's the gospel message. That's the gospel call. Think of what Jesus does. He's dealing with people who are hurting. He's dealing with the blind. He's dealing with the deaf. He's dealing with the lame. He's dealing with the outcasts of society, the lepers, the tax collectors, the prostitutes. All right? Jesus is dealing with all the people who are carrying within themselves some hurt, a wound of some sort, or they're outcasts of society. That's who he's dealing with. That's our call. That's our message. That's what we're asked to do, to help each other. We can't wave a magic wand and basically say, all right, everything is fine. No, everything is not fine. Everything is not fine. But we can reach out to each other and touch each other's hearts with compassion and with love. And I'm hoping today that perhaps that will be true for each one of you here this morning. That this time together will really spell out what the gospel message is all about. I don't know if anybody would like to question, fight. in our country, we're in fighting moods today. And so, you go to any public meeting, holy mackerel. I mean, you go to any Catholic meeting, sometimes in some parishes, and the people are screaming and yelling at each other. I said, holy mackerel. You don't have to agree with everything I say. But, to have an opportunity to come together as adult people and to put ourselves in a place where we can open our hearts is important. And I feel the church is a very appropriate place to do that.
I've always been curious. I lost my son at a very early age. When we pass on and we go to heaven, am I going to recognize him? Is he still going to be a baby, or has he grown up?
I wish I could answer that. It's funny you should say that, though, because this may sound like a stupid analogy. I think a princess Di, all right? How old would she be today? In the mind of everybody who lived through her death and witnessed her life, she will always remain young and beautiful. Always. Whereas you look at some of the movie stars who are, I saw a picture of Robert Loggia the other day. He was a movie star. And I couldn't believe, when you look at some of the TV shows and movies he was in, how he looked when he was 90 some odd years of age, completely different. I don't know how to answer that. I honestly don't. But I think if Princess Di, she will always be young in everybody's mind no matter what. She will never grow old, never. We'll never have an image of her in any other way than the way we remembered her.
It's the same with our own children. We're always going to remember how they looked that day. You don't see the 50 years down the road, is that my son or is that my son?
Right.
You always will remember them as they were.
As they were. The thing about heaven is it's a conundrum because people wonder. What kind of form will we be in? How will we be restored? I have no answer to that. We do look at the gospel stories, though, interestingly enough, and how Jesus was not recognized after his resurrection. We have those stories in the Gospels, that here is Mary, all right, going to the tomb, all right, and Mary Magdalene, and she thought he was the gardener. Well, how is it possible that Mary Magdalene, who followed Jesus and listened to his words and supported him during his 3 years of public ministry, how is it possible that after Jesus rises from the dead, she has no idea who he is? All right. Until Jesus says to her, Mary. And then she realizes immediately, all right, through that one word, it's amazing how we become attuned to a voice. All right. He says to her, Mary. And she immediately realizes, oh, this is the Lord. This is the Lord. I don't know, but one day we'll find out.
What if your child didn't believe? That had this big gap in my life.
What if your child, the question is, what if your child did not believe? But did not believe what?
In Jesus and church and heaven and all that.
Well, I look at it this way. Think of the number of people throughout the world who do not believe, but are good people. Do good things, have concern for others. I have, in my mind, as a priest, I have no doubt where they are. They're in heaven. I have no doubt. You know, when you look at the gospel stories, take Matthew's gospel. At the very end of the gospel, Jesus says, he separates the sheep from the goats. And he says to the sheep, I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was ill and in prison, and you came to visit me. All right? Think of how simple those actions are. All right? They're not heroic. We don't have to go and give our lives. Through simple acts of concern and kindness for other human beings and treating other human beings with dignity, which is, I think, something we're going to have to recover not only in our own country but throughout the world. I mean, what we're seeing today is a very, in my opinion, is a very threatening trend. That because of the color of your skin, because of your religious profession, because of your ethnic background, all right, we have people today who feel that you're not deserving of human dignity, all right. We have to recover an understanding of what human dignity is all about and reach out. I mean, I've done a lot of traveling throughout the world, and people there are people who are hurting, there are people who are hungry, there are people, let me tell you something, if by just providing a simple meal, a drink, whatever, to somebody, Jesus is already telling you, all right? He's already telling you, welcome, welcome.
So along those lines, what I'm doing for the remainder of my life is living with the presence of my son, sort of as like a little Jiminy Cricket kind of guy, guardian angels, since we're in a Catholic church. But I read the Revelation, and since we're going there, it says on earth as it is in heaven. And then in Revelation, is he coming, he's coming here. Like I'm confused. Are we live as if mind, you know, like, you know the question.
I think that the way we've been taught is that there will be a second coming of Jesus, all right, when the kingdom will be fully established. But now, the question then becomes is, well, when is this? Because we're very concerned about times, you know, trying to pinpoint the timeline. When will this happen? Some of the evangelicals actually believe, I mean, sometimes you hear them. The end days are coming. You know, they read about wars, they read about all kinds of disruptions of societies and whatnot. These are the end days. Jesus makes it quite clear when people ask him, well, is it going to be now? Is it going to be now? He tells them, I don't know. He says that. I don't know. I don't know. And that's the challenge. The challenge is to remain faithful in living the gospel message without knowing. Without knowing. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge for you. It's a challenge for me as a priest to be generous, kind, compassionate human beings, day in, day out. I mean, you know, I'm the oldest of 6 kids in a family, and when I think back, my mother and father, I remember bothering my mother. I mean, you know, when you're a young kid, you're always around your mother, all right? And you're always hanging on to their skirt, and you're in the kitchen, she's at the kitchen sink, and you know, like, go find something to do, all right? Go find something to do. I could think of my mother trying to get us, go outside and play, all right, or do something else, all right? You know, being a parent is extraordinarily difficult, you know, and my mother died 2 years ago, and she was 94, and as I think back on our life growing up as kids, she was a homemaker. My father worked. There was only one salary coming in. And I have a greater appreciation today of what it meant to be a parent and raising 6 kids. And you have to remember, in those days, you had to wash diapers. You had to boil the milk bottles. It was a whole different ball game in those days. And I think back on that. I said, woof, that was a job with 6 kids. My mother was always washing diapers. That's all I remember. And milk bottles in a pot on a stove, all right, being sterilized or whatever. Being a parent, you take on it. That's why I say the second most important decision you'll ever make in your life is being a parent and fulfilling the role of a parent and being a role model for your child. But there's no guarantee that it will always be good times. No guarantee. All right, that's why I try to instill in couples on the day of their wedding, listen to the words you are pronouncing. Listen to your words in good times and in bad. And I have no doubt in my mind that there is no young couple on the day of their wedding that's really giving full thought and consideration. How could there be bad times? All right, how could there be bad times? We're happy with each other. This is what we want to do. It'll all be good. It will not always be good. And that's why the church incorporates those simple words. And they're simple. They're simple. All right? They're not convoluted. They're not $10,000 words. They're simple words. Good and bad. Sickness and in health. All right? Just grasp what that means and understand it on the day of your wedding. But I'll be honest with you today, couples are getting married at the oldest age here in America that they've ever been married at. Late 20s, early 30s. We've never been married at that age. And you would think at that age, people know what they're doing. All right? Not always. Not always. All right? You would think there'd be a level of maturity at 29, 30 years of age. Well, let me tell you, I deal with some couples. Their interest is in what do we do between the service and the reception? Because we have 3 hours to kill, all right? I'm not interested in that, all right? This is not my problem, all right? So, I mean, we've been in business 2,000 years. I think we could say we know human nature to some extent. What we're trying to provide young couples with is an understanding as they move on with their life what this may entail from what we know. All right, be ready and be prepared.